Okay, welcome back to Python tutorial, and in this module we are going to be talking about casting. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing is to create a file right here. So this file, I'm just going to name it casting.py. It's a Python file, and that's generated successfully. So I'm just going to include the shebang line Python 3, and this is nice. Now what is about casting all about? Casting is actually about casting a variable, a data types, let me put it that way. So it's about casting a variable for a variable with the intent or with the intention of changing the data type of that variable. So let's go ahead by saying okay, name. So we know we want a name to actually be a string, right? So name equal to, so probably we can just go by name equals to Gabriel, so that's me. So this is actually a string. We can verify that name is a string if we actually print type of the name. So let's just go by Python 3 followed by casting Python. Okay, you can see we have is a class of string, but in a nutshell we can cast the same name to be equals to integer like that, and this is actually where casting actually came in and say 10. So if we check this up again, you can see the name is now an integer, even though you started from even though it's actually starts from string, and that is actually one example of casting. Another example of casting is say okay, num equals to int name. This is really wrong because it's not actually making sense, right? How could you think of changing a string that contain alphabetical letter into an integer? Let's just see what Python has for us. So Python actually basically threw an error to us, a value error, invalid literal for string. So we cannot actually turn this string into an integer. It's not actually it's not even possible. But let's just do something else that really looks scary right here. So let me just see another example. Num string. So I'm going to call it num string. So let's say we put 10 right here. So if I print type of num string, if I actually print type of num string, you'd see we have string straightforward like that. So that really looks good, right? So to get this thing really straightforward, we can just say num integer of num string, and that actually really looks cool and nice to Python. So it's not going to throw an error to us. That actually looks really on Python. So, okay, sorry. So this time around we're just going to print type of this num right here. So what we do is that we cast this string of 10, we change the original value into an integer number. Let's just check this out, and that actually works fine with Python. So right now the type of these are of this string is now number after you actually move through the process of casting. So we can actually do another one. We can say num floats, or we can just say 10.65. so just doing anything I like. So num floats like this. If you try to run this, you can see it's actually a float number. It belongs to the data type of floats. So remember what we do during the section of data types of floats, and right here we can actually cast this number and change it into an integer, or even we can change it into a string. It really makes sense with Python. So let's say string str floats equals to, so we're going to have str string function. So this actually casts this float number into a string. We can say okay, num floats. So instead of checking the type of that, we can say str floats. Let's see what is going to happen with Python. You can see right now the value of the float number is now in string, so the data type is now string. So what if we actually think of printing this into the terminal str floats? Okay, you get the idea. So you can see the value still remain the same, but the data type is a string, no longer a float. And that is how we can continue to do on. You can even make it a complex. Complex is going to work. So another very lazy way to do this, instead of putting everything inside a variable, is to say print. So definitely I'm going to have 2j. So 2j is actually a complex, variable data type. And if I check the type of this to verify what I'm saying, obviously we are going to get a complex value. So right here we are having a complex value here. So what I can do in a nutshell on this complex variable is to cast it right within the type. So I can say integer. I've not done this before, but I'm very sure there is a way to cast that. So we can just check Python. What do you have for? Say can't convert a complex to integer. Definitely that was throwing an error to us. Let's see if we can actually try to cast these complex into a string, so str. So instead of changing it to an integer, we are trying to change to a string. Let's see what we've got. Definitely we are able to cast these are into a string. So the reason why, if you remember, I use a number like this in the other tutorial to imagine a kind of a complex number for us. So which means I said this could be our imaginary part of the number that we actually don't want to memorize, which we are just using j to represent. So probably trying to cast this into a single integer, we'll be thinking of casting these into 100, which is not an appropriate value, but for some reason it's not just working fine with Python. Just need to keep that very, very safe and close. Okay, so we are actually in the end of this module. So just go ahead, try some couple of data types and see how much you can turn it around from one data type into another by involving in casting. Alright, see you in the next tutorial.